The great hall of the Shadow Moon Pack smelled of pine smoke and roasted venison. Sira stood at the entrance, her fingers trembling as she smoothed the emerald silk of her gown. She had chosen this dress deliberately, the one that made her eyes shine like forest glass, the one Marcus had once said made her look like a goddess descended from the old moon itself. But Marcus wasn't looking at her tonight. He stood across the hall beside Lyanna, the Beta's daughter, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. Lyanna laughed at something he said, tossing her golden hair over one pale shoulder, and Marcus smiled down at her with an expression Sira knew too well. It was the same smile he'd given Sira 3 months ago, before the choosing ceremony, before everything had shattered like ice beneath spring sun. The bond between them still hummed in Sira's chest, a golden thread the moon goddess herself had woven. Chosen mates were sacred, destined, unbreakable, or so she had believed. But Marcus had made his intentions clear when he'd begun courting Lyanna openly, flaunting his new affection before the entire pack. The bond might be divine, but his heart, it seemed, was mortal and fickle. "You look like you're planning murder," a voice murmured beside her. Sira turned to find her friend Wren, whose dark eyes glittered with mischief and concern in equal measure. Wren had been her confidant since childhood, the only one who knew the full extent of Sira's heartbreak. "I'm planning something," Sira admitted quietly, "though I haven't decided what yet." "Whatever it is, make it spectacular." Wren squeezed her hand. "You deserve better than Marcus Blackwood and his wandering affections." Before Sira could respond, a hush fell over the hall. The crowd parted like water before the prow of a ship, and Alpha King Demon Stormfang entered with his inner circle. Even among werewolves, whose nature made them larger and stronger than ordinary humans, the Alpha King stood apart. He was tall enough that most men barely reached his shoulder, with black hair that fell to his collar and eyes the color of steel in moonlight. Power rolled off him in waves, making the air itself feel heavier, charged with the weight of his dominance. Sira had seen him only twice before, both times from a distance. The Alpha King ruled over all 7 packs in the Northern Territories, but he rarely visited the smaller packs like Shadow Moon. His presence tonight was unusual, something to do with border disputes and territory negotiations that Sira didn't fully understand. What she did understand was opportunity. The idea struck her like lightning, sudden and electric. Marcus wanted to make her suffer by flaunting Lyanna. Then she would show him exactly how little his cruelty affected her. She would show him that a chosen mate scorned could rise far above his petty games. "Wren," she whispered urgently, "I need you to create a distraction." Wren's eyebrows rose. "What kind of distraction?" "Any kind. Just keep Marcus's attention on the eastern side of the hall for the next few minutes." Understanding dawned in Wren's eyes, followed quickly by alarm. "Sira, what are you planning?" But Sira was already moving, weaving through the crowd with practiced grace. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she approached the dais where the Alpha King had been seated. His council members flanked him, hard-faced warriors whose hands never strayed far from their weapons. She felt their eyes track her movement, assessing her for threats. She kept her chin high and her steps confident, even though her wolf was howling warnings in the back of her mind. This was madness. This was social suicide. This could end with her exile or worse. But then she saw Marcus watching her from across the room, his expression shifting from surprise to alarm as he realized her trajectory. Good. Let him worry. The Alpha King's eyes found her when she was still 10 feet away. They were extraordinary eyes, cold and calculating, but with depths that suggested volcanic heat buried beneath stone. He didn't speak, merely watched her approach with the patience of a predator who knew his prey couldn't escape. Sira's wolf whimpered, recognizing the vast chasm of power between them. He could snap her neck with barely a thought. He could destroy her entire family with a word. But she had passed the point of retreat. She reached the dais and executed her deepest curtsy, the formal greeting reserved for royalty. "Alpha King Stormfang," she said, proud that her voice remained steady. "I am Sira Whitethorn of the Shadow Moon Pack. I humbly beg a favor." Silence blanketed the hall. Every conversation died. Every eye turned toward her. The Alpha King tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You interrupt negotiations to beg favors of me?" His voice was deep, resonant, the kind of voice that could make commands sound like casual observations. "This should be interesting. Speak, Sierra Whitethorn." She drew a breath, committing fully to her reckless plan. "I have been seated at the lower tables, far from the festivities and poor company for such a grand occasion. I wondered if you might grant me the honor of sitting beside you this evening." The shock in the room was palpable. Someone gasped. Someone else dropped a goblet, and the clatter of metal on stone rang like an accusation. One of the Alpha King's council members, a scarred warrior with gray streaking his beard, leaned forward. "Girl, you forget yourself. The Alpha King does not grant audiences to—" "Magnus." The Alpha King's single word silenced his counselor instantly. Those steel-gray eyes never left Sierra's face. "You wish to sit beside me, at my side on this dais, where my most trusted advisors and honored guests are placed." "Yes, Alpha King." "And why should I grant this unprecedented request?" This was the moment. Sierra felt Marcus's stare burning into her back. She felt the weight of the entire pack's attention. She felt the gossip already beginning to spread like wildfire through dry grass. She met the Alpha King's gaze directly, which was bold to the point of insolence, and smiled. "Because I am excellent company, and you look as though you could use something interesting to occupy your attention. These territory negotiations must be terribly dull." Another wave of shocked silence. One did not call the Alpha King's business dull. One did not smile at him so brazenly. One did not meet his eyes without showing proper submission. But Sierra held her ground, her smile never wavering even as her heart tried to beat its way out of her chest. For a long moment, the Alpha King simply stared at her. She couldn't read his expression. He might order her seized. He might laugh in her face. He might. His lips curved into the barest suggestion of a smile. "You have audacity, Sierra Whitethorn. I'll grant you that." He shifted slightly in his chair, a throne really, carved from dark oak and inlaid with silver. Then he patted his lap once, a casual gesture that detonated through the room like a bomb. "Very well. If you wish to sit at the Alpha King's side, then sit here." Sierra's breath caught. She had asked to sit beside him. He was offering something infinitely more dangerous, more intimate, more scandalous. His lap. She could retreat now, apologize, claim she had overstepped, scurry back to her proper place and endure Marcus's smugness for the rest of her life. Or she could take what she had asked for and more. Sierra climbed the 3 steps to the dais, feeling as though she were moving through water. The Alpha King watched her with that same unreadable expression, waiting to see if she would lose her nerve. When she reached him, she hesitated only a heartbeat before gathering her skirts and settling herself carefully on his lap, perching on his left knee with as much dignity as she could muster. The Alpha King's arm came around her waist, steadying her, and the heat of his body burned through the silk of her gown. "Comfortable," he murmured, his breath stirring the hair at her temple. "Quite, thank you," she managed. From across the hall, she finally allowed herself to look at Marcus. His face had gone pale, his eyes wide with shock and something that might have been jealousy or fury or both. Lyanna clutched his arm, staring at Sierra with open-mouthed horror. The Alpha King followed her gaze and made a soft sound of understanding. "Ah," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "I see. The young man with the pretty blonde looks as though he's swallowed poison. Former lover." "Chosen mate," Sierra corrected, just as quietly. "Or so the moon goddess declared. He seems to have other ideas." "His loss appears to be my gain." The Alpha King's thumb traced an absent circle on her hip, a possessive gesture that did not go unnoticed by anyone watching. "Tell me, Sierra Whitethorn, are you always this bold, or am I witnessing a moment of inspired recklessness?" She turned to meet his eyes, surprised to find amusement glittering in their depths. "A bit of both, I think." "Good," he said, and this time his smile was real, sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous. "I have no use for cowards." The feast continued around them, but Sierra felt as though she existed in a bubble of tension and electricity, separate from the rest of the hall. The Alpha King's arm remained around her waist, his hand resting against her hip with casual possession. Every nerve in her body was aware of him, of the barely leashed power in the muscles beneath her, of the way his chest rose and fell with each breath, of the heat radiating from him like a forge. "You're trembling," he observed, his voice low enough that only she could hear beneath the renewed buzz of conversation. "I'm sitting on the Alpha King's lap in front of my entire pack," Sierra replied, fighting to keep her tone light. "I think trembling is an appropriate response." "Is it fear?" His thumb continued its lazy circles on her hip, the touch burning through silk. "Or something else?" She couldn't answer, because she honestly didn't know. Fear, yes, but also exhilaration and a strange sense of rightness that made no sense at all. Her wolf, which should have been cowering before his dominance, was instead preening with satisfaction. A servant approached with a golden plate laden with roasted meat and honey-glazed root vegetables. The Alpha King accepted it with a nod, then shifted Sierra slightly on his lap, adjusting her position so she faced the hall more fully. The movement brought her back against his chest, and she felt the rumble of his voice through her entire body when he spoke. "Eat," he commanded, not harshly, but with the expectation of obedience that came naturally to one who ruled 7 packs. "I'm not hungry," Sierra lied. In truth, she hadn't eaten since morning, too nervous about attending the feast and seeing Marcus with Lyanna. "You're too thin." He plucked a piece of meat from the plate and held it near her lips. "When did you last have a proper meal?" The intimate gesture sent fresh whispers rippling through the watching crowd. Sierra's cheeks burned, but she was trapped by her own audacity. She had chosen this throne, metaphorically and literally. She could hardly back down now. She accepted the offered food, and the Alpha King made a satisfied sound deep in his chest. "Good girl." The praise shouldn't have affected her. It was the kind of thing one said to a child or a pet. But something about the way he said it, the dark approval in his tone, made warmth pool low in her belly. "Tell me about your chosen mate," the Alpha King said conversationally, taking a piece of meat for himself. "The one who looks like he's contemplating murder across the hall." Sierra risked a glance at Marcus. He was indeed staring at them with an expression of barely controlled rage. Lyanna had moved away from him slightly, her pretty face twisted with confusion and jealousy. The sight should have brought Sierra satisfaction, but instead she felt hollow. "His name is Marcus Blackwood. The moon goddess marked us as chosen mates during the last full moon ceremony." She paused, swallowing against the tightness in her throat. "Or so I thought. Apparently divine will is less compelling than a beta's daughter with golden hair and a substantial dowry." He spurned a chosen mate bond. The Alpha King's voice had gone dangerously soft. "That's not just foolish. It's an insult to the goddess herself." "He hasn't rejected me formally," Sierra clarified. "That would break the bond and bring shame on his family. Instead, he simply courts another openly, making it clear that destiny means nothing to him while keeping me bound by sacred law." The arm around her waist tightened fractionally. "Cruel," the Alpha King murmured. "And clever. He keeps you tethered while pursuing his true desires. Tell me, does your Alpha know of this situation?" "Alpha Thornwood is Marcus's uncle. He finds the whole situation amusing, I think. He says young wolves must be allowed to explore their options before settling into mate bonds." Bitterness crept into Sierra's voice despite her best efforts. Easy enough to say when you're not the one being humiliated at every pack gathering. "So you decided to escalate the humiliation." There was a note of approval in the Alpha King's words. "Sitting on my lap in front of everyone. Bold strategy. Are you trying to make him jealous or simply to wound his pride?" Sierra considered lying, offering some dignified excuse. But there was something about the Alpha King's straightforward manner that invited honesty. "Both," she admitted. "And perhaps to remind myself that I'm not powerless, that I have choices, even if they're reckless ones." "Reckless," he repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, that's certainly one word for approaching an Alpha King you don't know and demanding to sit at his side. Some might call it suicidal." "Are you going to punish me for my audacity?" "I haven't decided yet." He offered her another piece of food, this one dripping with honey. You've certainly disrupted my evening. I came here to finalize territory agreements, not to play games with scorned mates. Shame heated Sira's cheeks. He was right, of course. She had been selfish, using him for her own purposes without considering his dignity or his time. I apologize, Alpha King. I shouldn't have. Don't. The word cut through her apology like a blade. Don't apologize for having a spine. Your chosen mate is a fool, and your alpha is weak for allowing this situation to continue. You did what you needed to survive with your pride intact. He paused, then added more quietly, I respect that. Sira turned her head to look at him properly, surprised by the understanding in his voice. Up close, his features were even more striking, all harsh angles and sharp edges, except for his mouth, which was surprisingly full. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against his tanned skin. He looked like what he was, a warrior king who had earned his crown in blood and battle. Why did you agree to this? She asked impulsively. You could have refused me, had me thrown out. Why let me sit here? The Alpha King's steel-gray eyes studied her face with unnerving intensity. Honestly, I was curious. It's been a long time since anyone surprised me. Most wolves approach me with either fear or calculated flattery. You approached me with desperation poorly disguised as confidence. His lips quirked. It was refreshing. I wasn't that obvious, was I? Your hands were shaking. You held my gaze too long, overcompensating for your nerves. And your scent. He leaned closer, inhaling near the curve of her neck, and Sira's breath caught. Your scent betrayed your fear even as you smiled at me. And yet you still let me stay. Like I said, curious. He pulled back, his expression thoughtful. Also, your chosen mate irritated me on sight. Any man who would spurn what the goddess offers deserves whatever torment he receives. A laugh bubbled up from Sira's chest, surprising them both. So I'm tormenting him with your assistance. Consider it a public service. The Alpha King's smile widened slightly. Though I'll admit, there are worse ways to spend an evening than with a beautiful woman on my lap, even one who's using me for revenge. The compliment caught Sira off guard. Beautiful. She'd been called pretty before, mostly by Marcus in the early days of their bond. But the way the Alpha King said it, casual and matter-of-fact, as though stating an obvious truth, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't expected. Before she could formulate a response, Magnus, the scarred counselor, leaned forward from his seat to the Alpha King's right. My lord, we should discuss the northern border terms before the night grows too late. Alpha Thornwood is waiting for your decision. The Alpha King's expression shifted, becoming cooler, more remote. Very well, summon him. Within moments, Alpha Thornwood approached the dais, his weathered face carefully neutral. He was Marcus's uncle, as Sira had mentioned, and the resemblance was clear in the strong jaw and dark hair, though Thornwood's was streaked with silver. His eyes flicked to Sira briefly, widening almost imperceptibly, before focusing on the Alpha King. Alpha King Stormfang, Thornwood said, bowing his head in respect. I'm prepared to discuss the boundary adjustments you proposed. Good. The Alpha King's hand remained on Sira's waist as he spoke, a clear message that he would not be dismissing her for the sake of politics. I've reviewed your pack's hunting records. You claim the Eastern Forest produces enough game to justify expanding your territory, but the numbers suggest otherwise. As the two alphas began their negotiation, Sira found herself in the strange position of being both present and invisible. They spoke around her, occasionally over her, debating boundaries and hunting rights and tribute percentages. She should have felt awkward, like an intruder on important pack business. Instead, she felt strangely powerful, as though by sitting here she had claimed space that belonged to her. The Alpha King's thumb never stopped its absent caress on her hip, a small gesture that kept her anchored even as her mind wandered. She watched Marcus across the hall, saw him drinking heavily, saw Lyanna trying to recapture his attention. But his eyes kept returning to Sira, to the sight of her perched on the Alpha King's lap, and each time his expression grew darker. Good, Sira thought viciously. Let him suffer as I've suffered. But beneath the satisfaction was something more complicated. The mate bond still hummed between them, that golden thread the goddess had woven. It pulled at her, wanting her to go to him, to soothe his distress, to fulfill her divine purpose. The bond didn't care about hurt feelings or betrayal. It only knew that her mate was in pain, and every instinct screamed at her to fix it. She forced herself to stay still, to ignore the bond's demands. Marcus had made his choice. She was simply making hers. "You're tensing up again," the Alpha King murmured, his attention momentarily diverted from Alpha Thornwood, who was consulting with one of his advisors. "Second thoughts." "No," Sierra said firmly, "just fighting my instincts." "The mate bond." She nodded. "I've heard it's painful, resisting a chosen mate bond, like fighting against your own nature." "It is," she admitted, "but some pains are worth bearing." The Alpha King's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Spoken like a survivor, he turned back to Alpha Thornwood. The negotiations continued late into the evening, the hall gradually emptying as pack members drifted away to their homes or to more entertaining pursuits. Sierra remained on the Alpha King's lap throughout, a position that should have become uncomfortable but somehow didn't. He shifted her occasionally, adjusting her weight, his touch always careful despite the casual possessiveness of the gesture. She learned things about him as she listened to the negotiations. He was fair but unyielding, willing to compromise on minor points, but immovable on matters of principle. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of pack territories, hunting grounds, and resource distribution across the northern regions. And he had a dry sense of humor that emerged occasionally, usually when Alpha Thornwood tried to exaggerate his pack's needs. "You claim the harsh winter decimated your stores," the Alpha King said at one point, "yet your tribute shipments arrived in full. Either you're hiding resources, or your pack has learned to survive on air and optimism." Thornwood had the grace to look chagrined. "We had reserves, my lord, but they're depleted now. Then we'll adjust the tribute for next season, but the boundary remains where it is. The eastern forest belongs to the Riverstone Pack by ancient right. I won't redraw maps because you failed to plan adequately for winter." When Alpha Thornwood finally departed, looking pleased despite not getting everything he wanted, the Alpha King leaned back in his throne with a sigh. Most of his council had dispersed as well, leaving only Magnus and one other warrior, both standing at a respectful distance. "You're still here," the Alpha King observed, glancing down at Sierra. "I half expected you to flee once your point was made." "Would you like me to leave?" Sierra asked, suddenly uncertain. The hall was nearly empty now, the servants clearing away the remains of the feast. Marcus had left an hour ago, pulling Lyanna with him, his face thunderous. Sierra's revenge was complete. There was no reason to stay. Except she found she didn't want to leave. "I didn't say that." The Alpha King's steel-gray eyes searched her face. "But surely your feet have fallen asleep by now. This can't be comfortable." "It's not terrible," Sierra said honestly. In fact, despite the awkwardness of the position, despite the scandal she'd created, she felt more at ease than she had in months. There was something steadying about the Alpha King's presence, something that quieted the constant ache of the mate bond. "Not terrible, high praise indeed." His lips quirked with amusement. "Tell me, Sierra Whitethorn, what happens now? You've made your statement. You've wounded your chosen mate's pride. Tomorrow you'll return to your life and I'll return to mine. Then what?" The question struck at the heart of something Sierra had been avoiding all evening. What came next? Marcus would be furious. Her actions tonight would have consequences she couldn't fully predict. Alpha Thornwood might punish her for disrespecting pack hierarchy. Her family would certainly have opinions. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "I didn't think that far ahead." "Clearly," the Alpha King studied her for a long moment. "You've created a problem for yourself. Your chosen mate will either demand satisfaction or reject you outright now. You've forced his hand." "Perhaps that was the point." Sierra met his gaze. "I'm tired of existing in limbo, neither truly chosen nor truly free. If tonight pushes him to make a final decision, then maybe the humiliation will be worth it. And if he rejects you, the breaking of a chosen mate bond is agonizing. It could kill you or drive you mad." Then at least I'll be free. The words came out more bitter than she intended. Sorry, that's dark even for me. Don't apologize for honesty. The Alpha King's hand moved from her waist to her back, a comforting gesture. I've seen what weak alphas allow to fester in their packs. Your Alpha Thornwood should have intervened months ago, forced your chosen mate to either commit or release you properly. Instead, he let you twist in the wind. Marcus is his nephew. Family loyalty, I suppose. Family loyalty that sacrifices pack members to spare relatives from difficult choices isn't loyalty. It's cowardice. There was steel in the Alpha King's voice now. A proper alpha protects all pack members, even from each other. Sierra found herself relaxing against his chest, drawn by the conviction in his words. Is that how you rule your packs? I try. I'm not always successful, but I try. He paused, then added more quietly, power without responsibility is tyranny. I didn't fight my way to this throne just to become the kind of king I overthrew. The admission surprised her. Everyone knew the Alpha King's history in broad strokes. He'd challenged and defeated the previous king in ritual combat 15 years ago, claiming the crown when he was barely 25. But the personal details were scarce. What was the old king like? She asked. Cruel, greedy. He treated the smaller packs like resources to be exploited rather than people to be led. The Alpha King's expression had gone distant, remembering. He took what he wanted and destroyed anyone who challenged him, not in honorable combat, but through manipulation and calculated violence against the weak. So you killed him. Eventually, after he murdered my sister for refusing his advances. The words were flat, emotionless, but Sierra felt the old rage beneath them like magma beneath stone. She was 16. He was going to make her one of his concubines. When she refused, he had her beaten to death and told my father it was a training accident. Sierra's breath caught. I'm so sorry. It was a long time ago. The Alpha King's hand resumed its gentle movement on her back. But it taught me something important. Power must be checked by honor, or it becomes monstrous. I swore when I took this throne that I would be different, that I would protect rather than prey upon those under my rule. Is that why you helped me tonight? Protection. He considered the question. Partly, also because I genuinely despise men who mistreat their mates. The goddess gives us these bonds for a reason. To reject them casually is not just stupid, it's sacrilege. You sound like you have strong feelings about mate bonds. I do. Something shifted in his expression, a flash of old pain. I lost my own chosen mate 7 years ago. Illness took her before we could complete the mating ritual. So yes, I have strong feelings about anyone who would throw away what I would give anything to have back. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with grief. Sierra understood then why he had allowed her reckless approach, why he had played along with her desperate scheme. He saw in her situation an echo of his own loss, a reminder of what the mate bond should mean. I'm sorry, she said softly. That must have been devastating. It was. He was quiet for a moment, then seemed to shake off the melancholy. But we're not here to discuss my tragedies. We're here because you decided to sit on my lap to make a fool jealous. When you put it that way, it sounds incredibly childish. It was incredibly childish. His tone was teasing now, lighter. Also incredibly effective. Your chosen mate looked like he wanted to challenge me to combat, which would have been entertaining if ultimately fatal for him. Sierra couldn't help but smile. You would have killed him. I wouldn't have had a choice. A challenge to the Alpha King must be answered, and I can't afford to show mercy. It would make me look weak. He tilted his head, studying her. Would you have mourned him? The question required real thought. Would she mourn Marcus if he died? The mate bond said yes, screamed yes, that she would feel his death like a wound to her own heart. But the woman she was becoming, the woman who had climbed onto an Alpha King's lap out of pure spite, wasn't sure. The bond would mourn him, she said finally. I don't know if I would. Does that make me terrible? It makes you human, or wolf, rather. The Alpha King shifted beneath her, adjusting his position. The mate bond is powerful, but it's not everything. You're allowed to resent someone who hurts you, even if the goddess marked them as yours. The elders say the bond is absolute, that chosen mates are destined to be together, that fighting it brings only misery. The elders say many things, some of them are even true. His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, the gesture startlingly gentle. But I've seen enough of life to know that destiny isn't always kind, and sometimes the goddess's plans are more complicated than we'd like. Maybe your chosen mate was meant to teach you something rather than be your forever. What could he possibly teach me, except that I have terrible taste? The Alpha King laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that transformed his harsh features. Fair point, though you did choose to spend your evening with me, which suggests your taste might be improving. Or getting worse, I'm not sure yet. Brutal, I like you, Sierra Whitethorn. His expression grew more serious. Which is why I'm going to give you some advice. What you did tonight was bold, but it's also painted a target on your back. Your chosen mate will retaliate, if not tonight then soon. And Alpha Thornwood won't appreciate you embarrassing his nephew in front of the Alpha King. I know. Sierra had been trying not to think about the consequences waiting for her. But I couldn't just do nothing anymore. I was drowning, and this felt like the only way to breathe. I understand, but understanding doesn't make you safe. The Alpha King was quiet for a moment, clearly wrestling with some decision. Finally, he said, I could offer you sanctuary, take you from this pack, give you a place in one of the others. You have skills, I assume, some trade or talent. The offer stunned her. You would do that for me. I would do that for any pack member being mistreated by their alpha's negligence. You deserve better than this. His hand cupped her cheek, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. Think about it. I'll be here until tomorrow evening. If you want to leave with me, come to the guest house before sunset. Sierra's mind reeled. Leave Shadowmoon Pack. Abandon everything she'd known, her family, her friends. Start over somewhere new, somewhere without Marcus and his betrayal constantly bleeding her dry. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was exactly what she wanted. I'll think about it, she managed. Good. The Alpha King stood then, lifting her easily and setting her on her feet. Without his warmth surrounding her, the night air felt cold. He steadied her as she found her balance, his hands lingering on her waist. Go home, Sierra Whitethorn, rest, and decide what kind of future you want. Sierra walked home through the darkened streets of the pack settlement, her mind churning with everything that had happened. The night air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, familiar smells that should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like chains, reminders of everything binding her to this place. The small cottage she shared with her younger brother sat at the edge of the settlement, near the forest line. Their parents had died 5 years ago in a hunting accident, leaving Sierra to raise Finn alone. He was 17 now, nearly old enough to live independently, but the responsibility for him had shaped every decision she'd made since, including her acceptance of the mate bond with Marcus, who had seemed stable and dependable before his affections wandered. She found Finn waiting up for her, sitting by the fire with a book he was pretending to read. He looked up when she entered, his eyes, the same forest green as hers, widening with concern. Everyone's talking about what you did, he said without preamble. They're saying you sat on the Alpha King's lap, in front of everyone. Is it true? Sierra sank into the chair across from him, suddenly exhausted. It's true. Why? Finn set his book aside, leaning forward. Sierra, what were you thinking? Marcus is furious. He came by here an hour ago, demanding to know where you were. I told him I didn't know, but he didn't believe me. He searched the cottage. Anger flared in Sierra's chest. He had no right to do that. He said he had every right, that you're his chosen mate and you'd humiliated him. Finn's voice dropped. He broke things, Sierra. Mother's vase, the one we kept on the mantel. He threw it against the wall. Sierra's hands clenched into fists. That vase had been one of the few things they had left of their mother, a delicate piece of pottery she'd made herself. Did he hurt you? No, but he scared me. Finn's admission was quiet. I've never seen him like that. His eyes were wild, and he kept talking about teaching you a lesson, about reminding you of your place. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Sierra's anger. She had known there would be consequences, but she hadn't considered that Marcus might take his rage out on Finn. Her brother was still young, not yet fully trained as a warrior. He couldn't defend himself against an adult male wolf in a rage. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "I didn't think he'd come here. I didn't think he'd involve you." "What's happening, Sierra? Why did you do it?" She looked at her brother, seeing the confusion and worry in his face. He deserved the truth. "I'm tired, Finn. Tired of watching Marcus court Lyanna while keeping me bound by the mate bond. Tired of being humiliated at every pack gathering. Tired of feeling powerless." She paused, then added, "Tonight I took power back, even if it was reckless. By sitting on the Alpha King's lap." "By sitting on the Alpha King's lap," she confirmed. "He offered me sanctuary, actually. A chance to leave Shadowmoon, start over in a different pack." Finn's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, fear, understanding. "You're thinking about leaving." "I don't know, maybe." Sierra rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. "The Alpha King said I should decide what kind of future I want, but every future I imagine seems impossible." "What do you want?" Finn asked. "Really want, not what you think you should want." The question cut to the heart of everything. What did she want? For months, she'd wanted Marcus to love her the way she loved him, to honor the bond the goddess had given them. But that want had curdled into something bitter. Now she wasn't sure what she felt for him besides resentment and grief. "I want to be free," she said finally. "Free to choose my own path, free from this mate bond that's become a prison. I want to wake up in the morning without feeling like I'm drowning." She met Finn's eyes. "But I won't leave you. Whatever I decide, we stay together." "What if I want you to go?" Finn's voice was steady. "What if I think you need to save yourself, even if it means leaving me behind?" "Finn." "I'm almost 18, Sierra, old enough to take care of myself. You've spent 5 years raising me, putting my needs before yours. Maybe it's time you did something for yourself." He smiled, though his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Besides, if the Alpha King is offering sanctuary, he'd probably extend it to me too. Right." Hope, fragile and frightening, bloomed in Sierra's chest. "You'd come with me, leave everything." "There's nothing here for me that I couldn't find somewhere else. Except you." Finn shrugged. "And honestly, after seeing what Marcus has become, I'm not sure I want to stay in a pack where that behavior is tolerated." Before Sierra could respond, a howl split the night, long, angry, and unmistakably Marcus. It was a challenge howl, the kind used to summon pack members to witness formal disputes. Sierra's blood ran cold. "He's calling you out," Finn said, his face pale. "In front of the pack." Sierra stood, her heart pounding. This was what the Alpha King had warned her about. Marcus was retaliating publicly, and she would have to answer. Pack law demanded it. "Stay here," she told Finn. "No." Her brother stood as well, his jaw set with determination. "If you're facing him, I'm coming too. You're not alone in this." They walked together to the central square, where pack members were already gathering. The full moon hung overhead, painting everything in silver light. Marcus stood in the center of the square, his chest heaving, his eyes bright with rage and something that might have been madness. Lyanna stood behind him, her face uncertain. Alpha Thornwood was there as well, his expression carefully neutral. And standing slightly apart from everyone else, flanked by Magnus and his other guard, was the Alpha King. He must have heard the howl and come to observe. His gray eyes found Sierra's immediately, and she saw the warning in them. "Sierra Whitethorn," Marcus's voice rang out across the square. "You have dishonored me, dishonored our bond, and dishonored this pack with your shameful behavior. I demand satisfaction." Sierra stepped forward, keeping her spine straight and her head high. She could feel every eye on her, judging, assessing. "What satisfaction do you demand, Marcus Blackwood?" "I demand you acknowledge your offense and beg forgiveness before the pack. I demand you swear never to approach the Alpha King again. And I demand you accept your place as my chosen mate with appropriate humility." The words were designed to humiliate her, to break her the way he'd been breaking her for months with his casual cruelty. A few weeks ago, she might have bent, might have chosen peace over pride. But she had sat on an Alpha King's lap tonight. She had felt powerful and free. She wasn't going back. "No," she said clearly. The crowd murmured. Marcus's face darkened further. "No." "No," Sierra repeated. "I won't beg forgiveness for refusing to accept your mistreatment. I won't promise to avoid the Alpha King, who showed me more courtesy in one evening than you've shown in months, and I will never accept humiliation as my proper place." "You're my chosen mate," Marcus snarled, stepping closer. "The goddess herself bound us. You don't get to refuse me." "Then maybe you should have remembered that before you started courting Lyanna." Sierra's voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "You can't have it both ways, Marcus. You can't spurn the mate bond when it's inconvenient and then demand I honor it when your pride is wounded." "How dare you?" "She dares because she's right." The Alpha King's voice cut through Marcus's rage like a blade through silk. He moved forward, and the crowd parted before him instinctively. "You've been playing a cruel game, Marcus Blackwood, keeping your chosen mate bound while courting another. It's dishonorable, and it reflects poorly on your Alpha for allowing it." Alpha Thornwood stiffened. "With respect, Alpha King, this is a pack matter." "It became my matter when this young woman sought my protection." The Alpha King's eyes were cold as winter steel. "And I'm inclined to grant it. Sierra Whitethorn has asked for sanctuary in one of my packs. I'm formally offering it now, in front of witnesses." The crowd erupted into shocked whispers. Sanctuary from the Alpha King was rare, usually reserved for wolves fleeing persecution or danger. To offer it to a pack member involved in a mate dispute was unprecedented. "You can't," Marcus protested. "She's mine, the bond." "The bond you've been disrespecting for months," the Alpha King's lip curled. "Don't lecture me about sacred bonds, boy. I know their value better than you ever will." He turned to Sierra. "What's your answer? Will you accept my offer?" This was it, the moment that would define the rest of her life. If she said yes, she would be leaving everything: her home, her pack, the land where her parents were buried. But she would also be leaving Marcus and his cruelty, Alpha Thornwood's negligence, and the constant pain of a mate bond that brought only suffering. She looked at Finn, who nodded encouragingly. She looked at Marcus, whose face was twisted with rage and something that might have been fear. She looked at the pack members she'd known her whole life, some sympathetic, others judgmental, most simply curious about the scandal. Then she looked at the Alpha King, who watched her with those steady gray eyes, offering freedom if she was brave enough to take it. "Yes," Sierra said, her voice ringing clear in the moonlit square. "I accept your offer of sanctuary, Alpha King Stormfang." Marcus lunged forward with a roar, but the Alpha King moved faster. One moment he was standing calmly, the next he had Marcus on the ground, one hand wrapped around his throat, the weight of his dominance pressing down like a physical force. "You will not touch her," the Alpha King said softly, dangerously. "She is under my protection now. Any harm that comes to her or her brother will be considered an act of war against me personally. Do you understand?" Marcus could only gurgle his assent, his face turning red. The Alpha King released him and stood, turning to Alpha Thornwood. "I'll be taking Sierra and Finn Whitethorn with me when I leave tomorrow. I trust you have no objections." It wasn't really a question. Alpha Thornwood's jaw was tight, but he shook his head. "No objections, Alpha King." "Good." The Alpha King offered his hand to Sierra. "Come, we'll get your things and you can stay at the guest house tonight. You'll be safer there." Sierra took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. As they walked through the crowd together, Finn falling into step beside them, she felt the mate bond with Marcus straining, protesting, demanding she go back. But for the first time in months, the pain felt bearable. Because she was finally free. The Alpha King's hand squeezed hers gently. "You did well," he murmured. "That took courage." "Or stupidity," Sierra replied. "I'm still not sure which." "With you, I suspect it's always a bit of both." There was warmth in his voice now, approval and something else she couldn't quite name. "Welcome to your new life, Sierra Whitethorn. I have a feeling it's going to be interesting." As they walked toward the guest house under the full moon, Sierra allowed herself a small smile. Interesting was certainly one word for it. Terrifying, exhilarating, impossible, all of those too. But whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. And perhaps, she thought, glancing at the Alpha King's profile in the moonlight, she wouldn't be facing it entirely alone.